I wish they were kidnapped, at least they would be alive. It was a comment left by one of you, and it stopped me in my tracks. Because as heartbreaking as those words are, they capture something very real about the disappearance of Jack and Lily Sullivan. When people go missing, when there are no answers, no goodbyes, no evidence of what really happened, families and communities are left in a kind of purgatory. And in that space, even the most devastating possibilities can feel like a form of hope. The idea of kidnapping is terrifying, but for some, it's less terrifying than the silence of death. If Jack and Lily were taken, at least they would be somewhere, breathing, waiting, still part of this world. And for a family caught in endless uncertainty, that tiny spark of possibility is sometimes all that's left to hold on to. Jack and Lily's case has always been haunted by silence. Two children who should have been safe vanished, and in the days and months that followed, the lack of clear answers created a void that was quickly filled with theories, speculation, and desperate hope. People cling to whatever fragments they can find. Some believe the children wandered off and got lost. Others suspect something closer to home. And then there are those who, like the viewer who left that comment, pray that if the children are not here, it's because someone has them, that there's still a chance to find them alive. It's a cruel paradox. To wish for something as horrific as a kidnapping means you've already accepted the unbearable alternative. And that's the space this case continues to occupy. Every new update from investigators, every new detail from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, is studied and dissected for signs that point one way or another. Yet the truth remains locked away, somewhere between the lines of silence and speculation. The RCMP have been relentless in this search. Just recently, they confirmed they are combing through more than 5,000 video files, 5,000 moments captured on cameras, phones, and security systems that could hold even the smallest clue. That number is staggering. Imagine investigators sitting for hours on end, rewinding and replaying, scanning faces in crowds, watching shadows move across backyards, looking for two children who seem to vanish into thin air. It's a reminder of both the vastness of the digital world we live in and the painstaking work required to cut through all that noise in hopes of finding one clear voice. And still, with all those files, there has been no breakthrough, at least, none that's been shared with the public. That silence feeds into the theories, into the longing, into comments like the one I read from you. Because the longer this drags on without answers, the more people are left to fill the gaps themselves. And when evidence is thin, hope and fear become the evidence people cling to. It's important to understand how the idea of kidnapping sits within this case. From the very beginning, investigators could not rule out the possibility that Jack and Lily were taken. There were no signs of forced entry, no obvious trails, but there also wasn't the kind of evidence you might expect if they had simply wandered away. That ambiguity left a door open for abduction theories, and over time, it's a door many people have refused to close. Not because they want to believe something terrible happened, but because believing in abduction is believing in life. When families hold out for that possibility, it's not denial, it's survival. It's the only way to wake up each day and keep going. And that's what makes this case so heavy, so impossible to set aside. Each day that passes without resolution becomes another day where the Sullivans and the community around them are forced to live in that limbo, where every sound, every headline, every update from law enforcement might finally be the one that brings clarity. The RCMP's decision to publicly highlight their review of those 5,000 videos wasn't just about procedure, it was about reassurance. It was a signal that they are still working, still pushing, still refusing to give up. For many, that update rekindled hope, because it means investigators are combing through leads that the public hasn't seen. Somewhere in those thousands of hours, there could be one detail that changes everything. A vehicle spotted where it shouldn't have been. A face caught in the background of a street camera. A movement too subtle to notice at first glance. These are the kinds of moments that have cracked cases wide open before. And they could again. But until that happens, until something concrete emerges, people are left balancing between hope and despair. That's why comments like the one we began with matter so much. They're raw, they're emotional, they're honest, and they reflect the same tension investigators are quietly wrestling with. Are Jack and Lily alive somewhere, waiting to be found? Or is the truth far darker, buried under silence and secrecy? In so many missing children cases, the truth has come down to a camera lens. A flicker of movement on grainy footage, a car passing in the background, a timestamp that proves someone was in a place they claimed not to be. Entire investigations have shifted direction on a single frame. That's what makes this review of more than 5,000 video files so important. Because if Jack and Lily were taken, if a car pulled away from the street at the wrong time, or if someone was captured lingering too long in the wrong place, it's possible that the answer isn't buried in the woods or hidden in silence. It's sitting on a hard drive, waiting to be noticed. And yet, the cruel truth is that even with all this technology, even with the hours and manpower being poured into the review, nothing guarantees a breakthrough. Surveillance cameras have blind spots. They can show us shapes but not always details. People walk in and out of frame, vehicles vanish around corners, and in rural or semi-rural areas like where Jack and Lily disappeared, many places simply aren't covered at all. That's why the absence of evidence often feels just as heavy as the presence of it. When nothing shows up, when frame after frame turns into another dead end, hope flickers but doesn't quite burn out. Instead, it twists into something harder, a desperate need to believe that the right piece of footage just hasn't been found yet. This is where speculation grows. The community begins to fill in the blanks, piecing together theories that investigators can't confirm and won't deny. Some argue that the children wandered off, and that the videos will eventually show nothing unusual because nothing unusual happened. Others insist the very silence proves otherwise, that if no trace exists, it must mean the children were taken quickly, quietly, and efficiently. That's why the idea of abduction still clings to this case. Because in the absence of certainty, the unknown becomes the stage for every possibility. And the thing about kidnapping, about holding on to that theory, is that it keeps a certain kind of hope alive. It's not a comfortable hope. It comes with fear and anger and endless questions, but it's still hope. Families in these situations sometimes describe it as living in two worlds at once. On one side is the fear that their loved one is gone forever. On the other side is the fragile belief that somewhere, somehow, they're still out there. Most days, the mind flickers between the two. Some days it chooses hope, because without it, there's nothing left to hold on to. That's why your comment struck so deeply. To say, "I wish they were kidnapped," sounds shocking at first. But it's really an expression of the same balancing act the Sullivans are likely living every single day. It's a way of saying, if the alternative is that they're gone, let me at least hold on to the version where they're still alive. It's not about wanting something terrible to have happened. It's about refusing to accept something worse. History has shown us how powerful that hope can be. Think about cases where children were found years after their disappearance, alive, hidden, waiting. Those stories, rare as they are, become lifelines for families like the Sullivans. They prove it's possible. They prove that clinging to the idea of kidnapping, as painful as it is, isn't always a fantasy. Sometimes it's the truth. And until the truth about Jack and Lily is finally uncovered, that fragile possibility will always linger. The RCMP's challenge is immense. Thousands of hours of footage. Leads that go nowhere. The need to rule out false sightings while staying open to genuine ones. Every day they push forward, not just against the weight of the investigation itself, but against the expectations of a community desperate for answers. And every time they remind us they're still looking, it's as much a message to the Sullivans as it is to the public. We haven't given up, and you shouldn't either. But the longer this stretches on, the harder it becomes. Silence grows heavier with time. And in that silence, the idea of kidnapping, unthinkable in most circumstances, starts to look like the most merciful option left. Because if they were taken, if someone out there knows where Jack and Lily are, then there is still a chance, however small, that the story isn't over. In cases like this, history often becomes the only guide. When investigators comb through thousands of hours of video, they're not just watching for random details. They're searching with the knowledge of how similar cases have unfolded in the past. And there are plenty of examples where a single overlooked clip made the difference. Take the case of Elizabeth Smart, abducted from her own home in Salt Lake City back in 2002. For months, the trail seemed cold. Leads dried up, sightings turned into false alarms, and even her family began to wonder if they would ever know the truth. But it was a fragment of witness testimony and surveillance images of her abductor, veiled, almost unrecognizable, that eventually cracked the case wide open. Elizabeth was found alive, rescued from a nightmare most believed had already claimed her. Stories like that are rare, but they remind us why families cling so fiercely to the possibility of kidnapping, because sometimes, against all odds, it means there is still life to be saved. Closer to home, Canadian investigators have seen similar breakthroughs with surveillance. Cameras on city buses, doorbell systems, even gas station footage have given them timelines, exposed lies, and put suspects at scenes they swore they were never near. That's the power of video in today's world. It doesn't just capture, it remembers. And for Jack and Lily, who slipped into silence with no known witnesses, the possibility that a camera somewhere caught the truth is the thread that could unravel the entire mystery. But this is also where the frustration grows. When the RCMP announced they were analyzing more than 5,000 files, it raised a question in the community. What have they seen? Are they holding something back? Law enforcement rarely lays all their cards on the table, especially in sensitive cases involving children. Releasing too much can compromise leads, alert potential suspects, or contaminate witness testimony. So investigators balance carefully. Enough transparency to reassure the public that progress is being made, but enough secrecy to protect the integrity of the case. That silence fuels speculation. Some believe the RCMP already have more than they're admitting. Others argue the review is more about procedure than progress, that they're exhausting every possibility because nothing concrete has surfaced. Both views live side by side, and both feed into the emotional roller coaster faced by the Sullivans and everyone following this case. Hope swells with the idea that answers may be just around the corner. Fear lingers in the thought that the search could still end with nothing. For the family, this is the cruelest reality. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss, a state of grief where closure is denied. It happens when loved ones vanish, when their fate is unknown, and when every day brings a different possibility. Families in this state live in limbo. They can't fully mourn, because there's no proof of death. They can't fully celebrate, because there's no proof of life. Instead, they oscillate endlessly between the two, trapped in a cycle of hope and despair. It's one of the most painful human experiences imaginable, and it's exactly what the Sullivans have been forced to endure since Jack and Lily disappeared. That's why the kidnapping theory, as unbearable as it sounds, becomes almost comforting. It transforms absence into survival. It gives shape to the unthinkable by suggesting the children are still somewhere, waiting. When people say, "I wish they were kidnapped," what they're really saying is, "I need to believe they're still alive." It's a way of making sense of the senseless, of giving the heart something to hold on to when the mind is drowning in uncertainty. Investigators understand this dynamic too. They know that every word they release carries weight. That's why their mention of the video review wasn't casual, it was deliberate. They wanted to remind the public that the case isn't cold, that they are still pushing forward. And in doing so, they gave the community something to hold on to, however fragile it might be. But the longer these cases stretch without resolution, the heavier that hope becomes. People begin to search for signs in every detail. They wonder if silence means progress or failure. They replay theories late into the night, comparing timelines, analyzing statements, trying to find the missing piece themselves. For families, it's even worse. Every sound outside the window becomes a possibility. Every knock on the door feels like it could be the one. Every phone call becomes a heartbeat moment, a rush of dread and anticipation rolled into one. The Sullivans are living this reality every day. They are forced to carry on in a world that has taken their children without giving them answers. And as the RCMP continue their painstaking work, watching those thousands of videos, cross-referencing every frame, the family waits. They wait for the one image, the one angle, the one glimpse that could finally tell them whether to grieve or to hope. This is why the viewer's comment, raw as it was, matters so much. Because it speaks not just to one person's feelings, but to the unspoken reality so many are thinking. Kidnapping is a horror no parent should ever endure, but in the absence of proof, it remains a lifeline. It means Jack and Lily could still be alive. It means the story could still end with them coming home. And until the truth is found, that possibility, uncomfortable, desperate, and fragile as it is, may be the only thing that keeps the Sullivans and this community going.